Let's talk about legal and governmental considerations, intercultural dynamic in the international company. So things like trademarks and international property, labor regulations, legal considerations in communication marketing, Milton Bennett's model of intercultural sensitivity, and Howell's levels of cross-cultural competence. Some of the things that we'll touch on as well this week. As strange as it may sound, trademark laws are not culture-free. They vary widely across the globe. Trademark regulations are major issues in international business. And here are listed two very valuable sources of information. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the World Intellectual Property Organization. So you can pretty easily find laws and regulations regarding trademarks and patents by just searching the country that you need. But generally, when it comes to copyright, you need to keep in mind two variables. How long do those rights last in the country of interest, and how can companies protect themselves from violators? So another potentially difficult to navigate area is labor regulations, and intercultural communication issues arise in the area of day-to-day communication with employees in multinational corporations. Did you know that in many European countries, you cannot contact your employees after hours, over weekends, during vacation leave, or during holidays? For example, if an employee is on vacation, their email box will be set to bounce back incoming messages to the sender saying that an employee will be available after a certain date, and please resend your email after that date. Sometimes incoming emails will be collected in a temporary repository, and when back to work, the messages will be released gradually, not to overwhelm the employee with like 300 messages the first day after vacation or sick leave. You have to be careful when hiring, promoting, and laying off employees in other countries, because under European labor laws, for example, an employee can claim wrongful termination if the employer dismisses the employee without notice or fails to follow disciplinary measures as stated in the contract before dismissal. So in the U.S., that's not the case. The employer or the employee can terminate a working relationship at any time, in most cases, for as long as reasons are lawful. Working hours, another area where differences arise. Federal laws in the U.S. have no universal limitations for working hours, where the European Union members, such as Switzerland and Germany, limit working hours to 45 in Switzerland and 35 in Germany. A few more areas where labor regulations vary pretty significantly. The training of employees, establishing safety rules and ensuring equal opportunity. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is an excellent resource on this topic if you want to know more. So when working internationally, companies really need to be aware of those rules governing advertising and marketing communication. So, for example, language can be strictly regulated. So in some countries, you cannot use the words best and superior, referring to your own brand compared with a competitor. And the use of children in advertising of children's product is another area to be mindful of. Over 30 countries, including many in Europe, Australia, Canada, Malaysia, Korea, and Russia, have national laws that set some limit on television advertising to children under 12 with the approval of the majority of the population. Greece has a ban on advertisements for children's toys between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. and a total ban on advertisements for war toys. I'd like to share a couple of classifications that I think are pretty interesting and helpful in understanding intercultural communication and how to train your employees to be sensitive and effective. Something called Milton Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. And if you take a look at it, I'll show you why it's kind of a valuable model to know something about. Starting from left to right, you can see 6 different stages, and the first 3 are related to ethnocentrism, which is the belief that my personal culture is the only normal culture that is at the center of human experience, and everybody else is considered a deviation. And then the last 3, refer to ethno-relativism. And that's really an ability to understand that there are multiple truths and multiple ways to live a human life. So denial is when a person is so unaware of cultural difference that he or she denies them completely. So, for example, if that person were a physicist, they could say things like, culture, what are you talking about? Atoms don't have any culture. And the next stage is defense. When a person at the denial stage learns that cultures do exist, the first reaction could be to defend their own culture because they feel that their beliefs are being attacked. And so at this stage, the person says, could say, yeah, cultures are different, but mine's still the best. Those insert Russians, Germans, Italians are just weird. This person learns a little bit more and reaches the stage of minimalization. And at this stage, he or she might say something like, yes, cultures are different, but deep down, we're very much alike. We think the same way. And if you remember the culture iceberg we discussed at the beginning of the class, then deep down we are very different. We think differently, we feel differently, we value things differently. And so that next stage is acceptance. And that's when the person not only understands there's differences, but also accepts them the way they are without judgment. So adaptation is the stage when the person's capable not only of accepting the difference, but adapting his or her behavior to other cultures, with that final stage as integration, which is typical for people who are truly multicultural. And perhaps they were born in a multicultural family, and switching between different cultures is something they've lived from the beginning. And they not only accept and adapt to differences, but they've integrated multiculturals into their own worldview and really can't imagine a monocultural mindset. Why is it important to know about this model, or why is this model important? Really, because when you try to design trainings for a group as a global leader, and when you try to design trainings for groups of people, teams, and organizations, it's very likely that you'll have people at different stages of intercultural sensitivity. And depending on what stage they're at, you'll have to adapt your training for working practices with these people. So, for example, if most of the people in your team are at the denial stage, it'd be useless to try and have discussions or case studies or the movies that we watch during the semester. Instead of trying to answer the question why people in that culture behave the way they do, because the people at the denial stage wouldn't even be able to comprehend what you're asking them about, and they would not be ready for this work. So instead of asking the why question, you would really need to provide them with simple exercises showing them that cultural differences do exist. And if most of your employees are in the minimization stage, then they think that all humans deep down below think similarly. You would not need to show them superficial ritual differences between cultures, such as eating with a fork and spoon or chopsticks, because they're well aware of the superficial level. Instead, you really need to address much deeper levels of cultural differences, such as values. And really, to summarize, depending on the stage or sensitivity that your employees are at, you really have to have different conversations about culture with each of them. So one more really excellent classification is Howell's level of cross-cultural competence. And the first level is unconscious incompetence. And it's when we're really not aware of existing differences and we don't even know we're incompetent. So an example that was shared earlier was a student sitting in China and having her feet up pointing to a statue and not realizing that this was something wrong, but understanding that other people were offended by what she was doing. So this was an example of unconscious incompetence. The next level would be conscious incompetence, and that's when you start to realize and become conscious that you might not know something. So when she was sitting there and noticed that others were looking angrily at her, she realized what she was doing was wrong. She didn't know what was wrong, but the next level would be conscious competence. That means you know about differences, you know what to do and what not to do, and you make an effort not to make mistakes. You're competent and you're making a conscious effort to behave in such a way that would not be offensive in another culture. And so after a while, when she came to know that showing the bottoms of her feet was disrespectful, especially to a statue that was considered reverent, she became competent and stopped doing it. And so that last level is unconscious competence. And that's when you're so used to another's culture's way of life, you behave with competence and you don't even have to think about it or make a conscious effort. And it becomes your second nature. So the lesson here is that education's key in cross-cultural competence. And the more you learn, the easier it becomes for you to function in that other context. And therefore, the less effort it requires for you over time. So learning about culture makes your life a lot easier. So thank you so much. I hope that these kind of perspectives and a little bit of foundation about cross-cultural, intercultural, and global leadership, just laying a bit of a theoretical and principled foundation, is going to be beneficial in addition to the wonderful readings, the discussion board questions, and the films in terms of applying some of these principles for your cultural ethnography and storytelling presentation all together. It's going to be beneficial for you in this course. Take care and have another great week.